everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we are really excited today. We're talking with actress Eliza Bennett, who is the star of the new film An American in Austen. And Eliza, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is so much fun. So this is your first time on the podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about how you got inspired to get into acting?
Oh my goodness, that's a big question.
I know.
Well, hello, I'm Eliza Bennett. I am in American in Austen on Hallmark, and I actually started acting. I'm a child actor, so I started when I was 8 or 9 years old. As you can tell from the accent, I am English, so I started off sort of in London. Actually, my first job was playing Jemima in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang in the West End in London. So I started in musicals actually. And then, and that was only like 10 years ago because I'm so young. No, that was it.
Yeah, so you've done both stage and screen in your career. That must be very exciting to work in both.
It has, yeah. I feel like I've been lucky to sort of have an eclectic sort of selection of jobs over the years. And yeah, I started off in musical theatre and I did a little bit of that as well. When I turned into an adult. But yeah, it's been a real mix of film and TV as well. So
yeah,
been lucky.
Well, being named Eliza Bennett, it had to be just total kismet for you to get this role, being in Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, when they offered it to me, I wasn't sure whether that was like 90% of the reason. But yeah, my parents, if you can believe it, they didn't really even connect the dots, obviously because it's Elizabeth Bennet in the book. So they kind of were like, oh no, she gets called Lizzie. And but I think occasionally she does get called Eliza. I don't know whether that's correct or not. But yeah, if you can believe it, my mum didn't even make the connection. And then I've got asked about that so many times. So yeah, it's crazy. I was meant to at least do something to do with Pride and Prejudice at some point.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, did you feel like you were born to play this role?
Well, yes, I guess you could say most people would have thought that at some point I should have played Elizabeth Bennet, but this is kind of a fun version of it that I get to play opposite Elizabeth Bennet. And I actually play American in it. So it's so yeah, not really what the OG name was for. But no, it was so fun to sort of to do a version of Pride and Prejudice that was such a twist on it as well and had a lot of humor in it.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies. Well, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the movie, what they can expect?
Yes, so American in Austen is about a woman called Harriet, who is an aspiring author, but her life is sort of in kind of a chaotic place. She's sort of doubting her work life, her ability, her boyfriend. She's sort of doubting a lot of these decisions that she has coming up. And she sort of is fixated and idealizing Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice. And she finds it hard she continually sort of compares everyone to Mr. Darcy. And so one night she wishes upon a star, as you do, and she ends up sort of propelled into the book itself. And the film sort of follows her journey alongside the Pride and Prejudice story. And as she starts to sort of get more involved and become more involved with these characters and with Mr. Darcy, the book starts to come undone. And the film sort of is focused around whether Harriet can sort of put the book back together.
And was that challenging to do the American accent?
Do you know what? It definitely can be challenging. It's always a little bit challenging, but I've done it a few times now on a few jobs sort of over the last decade, and it gets a little bit easier as you go. But yeah, the first couple of days are always like the time that it feels most foreign in your mouth, and then by the time that you finish shooting, it's definitely a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Now you've worked with people like Colin Firth and Emma Thompson, like king and queens of the world of Jane Austen. Do you feel like you were inspired by some of their work for this?
Oh my goodness. I mean, yeah, I remember when I was doing Nanny McPhee actually with Colin Firth, and I got asked a question on a panel once. Like we both got asked a question if we'd ever thought about the fact that my name was Eliza Bennett and he played Mr. Darcy. We both were like, no, never thought about it. But no, obviously they're iconic in the Jane Austen adaptations, and I'm very lucky to have worked with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're like the OG icons of
Yeah.
this thing.
So, what do you think a modern person would struggle the most with in the Regency era?
Oh my goodness, the outfits. I will say we wore incredible outfits in this film, and I think it's a real highlight of the movie is how extraordinary the outfits were. I will say 90% of them were so deeply uncomfortable, so scratchy, so tight, like always sort of like sticking you in the wrong places. So even though they look extraordinary, I will say living in those 24/7 would be very, very difficult. That's probably the worst part of it. Other than that, and also you'd spend hours and hours having your hair done because they have these incredible elaborate hairstyles all the time, and they always had their hair up. So I think that long and hair and makeup would kind of be a bore after a while.
So your character gives advice to Darcy and the other characters. And could you kind of relate to that as you're reading Jane Austen or watching the films, being like, I know what I would say to them?
Yeah, well, I think it's always interesting, isn't it? Jane Austen always wrote sort of women that were ahead of their time. But then when you take someone that is of our time and put them back, she can't but help feel that a lot of their views on their responsibilities and putting their own needs aside for that of their family or for men is a little bit archaic. So sort of having that modern voice sort of coming in, I think a lot of the humor of the film is sort of that friction between sort of the modern views of how women should be able to choose who they love and choose who they're with and not sort of marry someone just to save their family. Yeah, it was fun to sort of have to be the one in the film that's like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to marry that man that's weird and says strange things and eats pea soup weird. Like, you don't have to do those things. So yeah, it was definitely fun to be sort of that person and to be able to ad-lib moments like that too.
Well, I thought that the pea soup scene must have been a fun one to film. I know it's hard filming eating scenes in movies.
Yeah, you'll notice I don't eat that pea soup very much. And also it was like, we all have to decide whether we like the pea soup. And I was like, I just feel like my character won't like this pea soup. So but poor Joe and who plays Collins and Nell, who plays Elizabeth, they had to eat. I mean, they ate like 4 bowls through that whole scene and it was freezing cold. The hardest thing of that scene was honestly not laughing because I think Joe, who plays Collins, is so funny and so
he was really good.
Yeah, he was wonderful.
Yeah, so you have to not only do the Regency dance, but you have to kind of be bad at it at certain points. Yeah. And so was that fun?
Yes, definitely more fun than the people that had to be completely perfect dances. Actually, that was one of the most fun days, I think. Before we started shooting, we had 2 days of rehearsals of learning all the Regency dances. And I learned most of them in order to then be rubbish at them. So but that was really fun because it was the whole cast, all the Bennett sisters, all the boys, and we sort of had these incredible dance lessons with this amazing teacher who was exactly sort of like gave me flashbacks from my ballet teacher when I was 6, who would be screaming at me, and it was a lot of fun and a lot of laughter. And yeah, those ballroom scenes I think were like our biggest bonding days as a cast.
So how did you even get this role? How did that all happen?
Honestly, do you know what? You'd have to ask Hallmark because they very kindly sent me the script and I read it and I just thought it was really fun. I think this movie breaks the it breaks the mold of a lot of Hallmark films, because
Mhm.
the large majority of the film centers around the Pride and Prejudice book, and a lot of that centers around the relationships between Harriet and the Bennett sisters. And I think, you know, there is love stories woven through it, but I think so much when you watch this, a heart of this is the relationship between the women, and sort of how they love each other and how they encourage each other and how they communicate, and really family as well, and what that does. You know, it's kind of like the power of sisterhood. I hate to sound cliche, but a lot of it centers around that. So I found it interesting also to read sort of a Hallmark story that kind of broke that sort of like romantic mold, and showed it in sort of a different way.
Well, and I think people are really going to like Ethan's in this movie, the character of Ethan.
He's
I think
so
it was
cute.
very, very swoon-worthy, very sweet.
He's very cute. The first time I met him, Bert, who plays Ethan, we met, and 15 minutes later we had to do a photo shoot of like all of our relationship photos over the last like 3 years.
Oh yeah.
It's very strange sort of meeting someone, going, hi, it's really nice to meet you, and then like me just like getting on top of him and just, you know, like tumbling in the grass and taking, you know, our first photo at concert. So we had to bond very quickly, but luckily he's so adorable. I think the Hallmark audiences are going to love him.
Yeah, it was really cute. I'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor of this episode of the podcast. It's the novel The Secret Ingredient by bestselling author Nancy Nagel in a new edition from Harpeth Road Press. Years ago, Kelly McIntyre couldn't see her life getting any sweeter. She was engaged and dreaming of opening a restaurant with her fiance, Andrew York. But life had other plans for Kelly. Now she's the owner of an adorable pot-bellied pig named Gray, and she also runs her own bakery. Business is good, so good, that she's invited to compete in a Valentine's Day baking competition in New York. As she prepares for the contest, she's feeling confident until she hears that Andrew is back in town. Will they agree on the secret ingredient to happiness, or will they get more than they bargained for? Perfect Valentine's escape that will have you nibbling your favorite chocolates and snuggling up late into the night. If you enjoyed the TV movies based on Nancy's books and are looking for more delightful romance, look no further. You can get The Secret Ingredient at harpethroad.com or by using our affiliate link below. That's harpethroad.com. And it must have been fun to work with, I mean, the whole cast. It seems like it would have been a blast. But Nicholas Bishop playing Darcy, that's fun.
Yeah, Nicholas is, he was such a treat for me to work with. We hit it off right away. And I mean, I think you can feel when you watch this how a lot of people in interviews say, oh, the cast was great, we got on so well. But this cast was really, really, really special. And Nicholas is so funny, so smart. Had all of us in stitches every day, and the girls that play the Bennett sisters are just honestly incredible women, and I really think that you can feel that when you watch it, how much we all sort of deeply loved each other, and we all really became a family.
Well, last question, if you were going to give people a pitch, like, you'll like this movie, watch it, this is the reason to tune in, what would you say?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think this movie does really have like a lot going for it, in the fact that you have love stories, actually multiple, running at the same time. You have a lot of a family dynamic and the importance of what it is to be sisters and to support one another. And then there's also like a lot of comedy in it. There's a lot of sort of like the old and the new, the modern, and then the Regency era. And then fundamentally, it's beautiful. We shoot a lot of it in Ireland, and the countryside and the costumes. It's gorgeous. So if you love a comedic love story in a Regency era, I think you're going to love it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this won't be your last time on Hallmark Channel. Hopefully we get to see you again.
I know.
And, yeah, welcome to the family.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yes. I'd like to thank Eliza for coming on the podcast. This was so much fun to get to meet her. Let me know what you think about the things we talked about. Are you excited for American in Austen? Put in the comment section or on Twitter, and make sure you're following me on social media at Rachel's Reviews. And also make sure you're following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. We really, really appreciate that. And if you are watching YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group and merch store, and we'd love to see your support there. We have some Jane Austen inspired merch even. So please check that out. Thanks again to Eliza, and we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.